Hello everyone, this is John from the Operations family. Thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to join our community, feel free to visit our website operations.family and apply. We'd love to have you on board. The interview was organized by Palette, a SaaS platform that simplifies and automates sales commissions. If calculating sales commissions is taking too much of your time, or if you'd like to improve the process, Palette is directly synchronized with your CRM and other data sources to crunch the numbers and calculate commission payouts. Visit palettehq.com for more information. And now, without further ado, let's hear Josh Dzielak, co-founder and CTO at Orbit, discuss about building communities and turning communities into a growth engine. Cool, Josh. So happy to talk to you today. Looking at your profile, it seems you already had multiple lives. You worked 6 years as a consultant for a big IT company. You were the VP engineer at King.io, early employee at Algolia. You spearheaded developer relations there. You co-founded Developer Mode, and now you're the co-founder and CTO at Orbit. Thank you so much, Josh, for being with me today.
Thank you, Jean and Darren, for having me on and for that nice introduction.
So today we're going to talk about communities, but before we jump right into it, can you tell me a little more about Orbit and what you're building?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Orbit's a community experience platform that makes it easier for community-driven organizations to figure out who's in their community, how is their community growing, where is the engagement increasing, where is the engagement decreasing. And it's basically just a tool that community managers, developer advocates, marketers, and anyone who is involved in the community that's built around a product, a service, a developer tool, or really any kind of SaaS product or community. It's something for them to be able to collaborate and plan and structure community building efforts, and also report on the ROI of building the community and its impact to the business.
So that sounds like salespeople have Salesforce, marketing people have HubSpot, support people have Zendesk, and now they also have Orbit to work with communities.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's a good metaphor. One of the insights that led us to starting the company was just that community advocacy, evangelism, even product people who are talking to customers quite a bit don't always have the right tools in place, and the tooling's not nearly as sophisticated as Salesforce is for sales, as Marketo is for marketing. So we're trying to provide a tool that's as sophisticated as what other departments, other teams around the company enjoy, but for the people who are really focusing on the community and the bottoms-up adoption, bottoms-up go-to-market.
Okay. Why did you want to work on this? Was this because there were no tools? What was the reason for you to found the company?
Yeah, there were no tools available when I was doing DevRel at Keen and then in Algolia. All the tools that we had were spreadsheets or scripts that we had written, Google Data Studio, things that we had thrown together. There was nothing there. We used a bit of CRMs and other types of customer tools from around the company. Intercom would be an example, a bit of Salesforce, but didn't really feel like those were those were the right tools to help us organize what we were doing. So we ended up just doing a lot of that. And I did consulting with a lot of companies in between Algolia and Orbit to understand what was holding them back from being, from having a stronger position on their go-to-market, the tools for their community teams. And everyone said, wow, we don't have tools. We love the ideas, but we don't have tools for doing this. And so that's really when the light bulb went on.
Yeah, cool. So interesting that you mention communities, but also go-to-market in the same sentence. So maybe I don't know anyone who knows better about communities and building communities than you. So let's talk about communities. Why should companies care about communities in the first place?
I'd say communities are becoming a big part of the way that companies acquire customers and the way that companies educate the market about what they're doing. In the past, we've always seen a lot of one-to-many messaging, traditional marketing, advertising, many ways to get the word out that are just the company speaking to its audience or trying to build an audience. But what we see, and especially in the developer world, is that the way that news about new travel, new products, new services, the way that that travels is through word of mouth, through referral, through developers or early users talking to each other. And so that initial building awareness around new things, especially for the developer persona, really requires a non-traditional approach, and not one where we're just using marketing to try to reach the biggest number of people possible, but we're using more of community to reach exactly the right people who have the right thing to contribute or to gain by being in the community at that time, and then who will share their experiences, because everybody will trust their friend telling them about a tool more than they're going to trust some promoted tweet that they read on Twitter. So there's also a lot of trust and authority that you can build around the company by building that community.
Would you say that communities are more important for companies that are engaging with developers, or does it relate to every company?
I think developers are one of the first areas that we see this be so pervasive. And I think the relationship developers have with open source software accelerated a lot of that transition, because developers were already used to forming communities around open source. And so when APIs, infrastructure, other developer tools came into the market, developers have a lot of the same expectation around those tools. Like, there should be a version that I can try for free, maybe a lot, because I have open source software and I can just clone that and run myself. And I should be able to talk about it. I should be able to go to a meetup. So a lot of things that came, they came from the open source world, but then companies who are marketing, building things for developers had to play by a lot of those same roles. So we see a lot of the community approach initially come from that. But our belief is that this is coming everywhere, because we have the internet, because everyone's hyper connected, because it's so easy to do diligence about any kind of product with existing customers online, whether that's reading reviews or other things that they've written, or just talking to them. Like, it's so easy to get in touch with people these days and say, hey, what's your relationship with this company? What did they sell you? Do you like it? Do you not like it? It's like the information is so pervasive that community is really a great way. When you're a good product or service, community is a great way to get
So
to take advantage of that.
Developer communities have been online for ages now, and it's funny to see that some companies are just starting to be aware of everything that exists. And actually, I should probably send this video to some hedge fund companies when you see what's happening in the news.
They're starting to get the hint. We saw in the news recently with finance and a community of people on Reddit, as it were, having some pretty big impacts around the world. So, but open source software and open source businesses like GitLab, like Elastic, like many others, the size and scale of those is pretty amazing, and I think that's attracting a lot of people and a lot of attention to the developer space that wasn't there before.
So every company should care about communities, and it's not only about the go-to-market, whether or not you are like bottom-up with a self-service product, or if you are an enterprise company selling to Fortune 500 companies, you still need a community.
The community is going to benefit in both situations, in both circumstances. You don't have to. I know it's not just for the bottoms up adoption. On the enterprise side, even the enterprise buyer is going to do research, investigation. If it's an open source or in the developer space, they're going to go to GitHub and figure out, is this thing that we're about to bet our data center on, our developers happy about it? Are the trends going up? Are the number of PRs and contributions and things like that increasing or decreasing over time? So even the enterprise buyer is going to look at the community, and that's going to be a part of their decision. If there's no activity, they're going to question, like, what other alternatives are there that have more activity, that have more developers contributing to it, that are healthier projects, that resolve issues and pull requests more quickly versus projects where it takes months at a time. those community signals, they're publicly available. Anybody can go look at them. And so even the enterprise buyer who's going to make a huge decision on some piece of open source software or some piece of hybrid or closed source, that's the kind of research that they're going to be able to do.
Yeah,
And can do today.
And that's great. And also, I think that salespeople do not necessarily know what developer relations is, and maybe it would be actually really good for you to kind of define what is DevRel and what does a developer advocate do.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'd say developer relations is as an idea and as a team is a couple of decades old now. For people would say one of the first developer evangelists was Guy Kawasaki working at Apple back in the day. Now it's really caught on in the last 10 years because there have been so many companies buying and selling to developers. The mission of the developer relations team is really to inspire, to equip the developers who are potentially going to work with that company, who are already working, to understand their challenges, what they're looking for inside of the product, where the developer experience is really working or really isn't. And then the developer experience is really just a parallel to the user experience. Are developers able to call the API successfully, resolve their errors? When they have a support question, can they get help? And so, and then at the same time, the developer relations team is looking at working with the existing developers who are using the service. They're also looking at the entire market and looking at the competition. What are the other tools that are competing for developer mindshare in our space? And how do we eventually make sure that we're the tool that gets the most mindshare? How do we make sure we're the best tool and that developers know about us? You can make an extraordinary developer tool, but if nobody knows about it, it's going to be very hard to build a community. It's going to be very hard for that to be the competitive advantage to the business that it's going to be looking for.
And go for it. There is competition when you see that there are 24,000 APIs, publicly available APIs, in 2021. There is competition for developer mindshare, as you call it.
The modern developer is very has an extraordinary number of tools at their disposal, and now it's less about having more tools and more about teaching developers what each one of those tools does, when they should use it, when they should use something else. So there's a lot of education that goes into the DevRel and dev advocacy mindset. We're trying to educate the developer so that they can make the correct choice themselves. So they eventually find themselves in the right path of adopting an open source project or buying a tool that suits their needs. So developers have an infinite amount of choice, but it's also quite paralyzing and quite difficult for most developers to look at a huge landscape of tools and choose the right thing for the next project. So
when you say things like that, my former sales background thinks about funnel, like, all right, so let's talk to a bunch of of people and see who we can get in our community. But you actually wrote about that at Orbit, about the fact that the funnel and traditional sales method or traditional marketing method are do not apply to building communities.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about what is the Orbit model?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Orbit model is a different way of visualizing the customer relationship, or the relationship that a prospect or a customer has with the business, specifically when they're part of a community that's growing around the business. So the Orbit model is designed to help community builders, the business, understand who is in the community, what is their engagement, what do we need to be doing for them. Some questions that can come from that are around maybe the commercial opportunity with a given developer. So maybe the Orbit model and the funnel kind of connect, because the Orbit model can tell you, oh, you have 5 developers who are working at this Fortune 500 company who have all started contributing to the project recently, or they've all they're engagement is increasing or maybe it's decreasing, but maybe if it's increasing, we want to talk to them about it's the right time for a sales conversation because they work at a Fortune 500 company. So the goal of the Orbit model isn't to replace the funnel, it's to use a different metaphor when it comes to building the community, where for the community members, we're not trying to push them through stages of the funnel in the way that when we're trying to drive someone toward a purchase in sales, where there's kind of a linear or a binary outcome. It's like they're either close won or close lost, or that something is going to happen. In the community, it's a lot more fluid and it's a lot messier. You might have a community member who's giving talks and really helping drive a lot of awareness. And the most valuable community members are not the ones paying for the product quite often. So if you measure only revenue around what the community is generating, you miss out on the awareness and the eventual business value of the awareness that the community's members are generating. So we don't look in the Orbit model at the immediate or direct connection between community activity and things like deals closed or revenue, but we do look at when these community members are orbiting around, they're there. That means the company is able to stay top of mind. So when that developer, when that person starts to think about, oh, I'm really loving this, I want to recommend it to my company, I think my company should be buying this. That's that's the right time. But why that happens is we've kept them in orbit. If we had, before they were ready, if we had tried to push them through the funnel and try to get them to a purchase, it might have been totally the wrong time. And so the timing is very important. That's why with the Orbit model, it's okay if someone stays in the same orbit level for a while. We don't have to push them to the next stage yet. They can stay there. They can go out and come back in. So it's different than the funnel. In the funnel, it's a little bit like we want things going in one direction. And if once someone's out of the funnel, I'm going to focus on someone who's still in the funnel. Definitely, community, you got to look at everybody.
You wouldn't say to a VP sales, it's okay if this account stays at the same stage of the funnel, like if it's okay if they're
that's not a thing.
Okay, so the Orbit model is you have the company at the center of this system. Let's call it the solar system.
The solar system, that's it. Yeah.
And then you have different orbits, and those orbits represent company advocates or fans, or what? It's only one orbit or multiple orbits?
Typically, we divide it into 4 parts that are kind of concentric circles that are further and further out from the core, from the inside. That's the solar system or the sun, or the sun at the center of the system.
Okay.
And we call those advocates, contributors, participants, and observers.
Okay.
Those are just names that we pick because they work in pretty well for most developer communities. But the idea, even if those labels don't apply perfectly to your community, the idea is that you have some members who are highly engaged, some that are less highly engaged, some that are a little bit less than them, and then a lot of people, what we call the observers, who are out there in the 4th orbit level, where they're watching, they're aware, they might have started a GitHub repo, signed up for a newsletter. We don't know much about them yet. They're not really active community members, but they are present. They are they are in the orbit. And then then we think about, for each one of those stages, how do we provide opportunities for people to move in? Like, what is it that gets an observer excited to contribute or excited to participate? What is it that gets a participant or a contributor to become an advocate, where they're almost like an employee for the company in terms of their ability to create visibility and lots of great things, contributions, becoming an organizer for events. So.
Okay, that's there are tons of interesting things here. So maybe my first question is, how do you put people in the different orbits? Is it only about their interest or their engagements with the company?
Yeah, exactly. The engagement is what we look at, both in the Orbit model and then the Orbit application, which is the tool that we're building that's based on the model and that helps people practice it. We look at a couple of signals. The activities that the person is doing, we model kind of everything as an activity. So if someone does a pull request, that's an activity. If they attend an event, that's an activity. If they subscribe to the newsletter, everything's an activity. We look at that activity stream and we perform some simple algebra about it. Like, how many activities are they doing? what's the weight of each activity, because a pull request is worth more than a GitHub star. Giving a keynote at the user conference is worth a lot more than just like clicking a link on an email. So we put a little bit of weighting in there to make sure that the activities count for different amounts. And then the last thing we look at is the time between the activities, and specifically the time between the last activity that they did. So if someone did a ton of activities 6 months ago, their love is the metric that we use to describe this. It essentially means engagement, but we have kind of our own vocabulary around it. So we call it love. And their love 6 months ago would have been really high, but if they haven't done anything in 6 months, their love would have gone down. And that might mean that they've also moved out to the next most outer orbit level.
Okay, cool. So you also need to engage with the community. And how do you do that? How do you engage with the community? And also, what can you expect from a community? If you can expect something. Sorry, so the internet cut out for a moment. The question was, how do you engage with a community, and also what can you expect from your community?
Yeah, so for what to expect from the community, it has to do with the value that you're creating for them, getting them really excited about contributing something back, and then just asking them what they want to contribute. And some examples from the developer space are very much in terms of contributing to the software itself. So usually a passionate community of developers is going to make commits and provide code, provide development back to the project. They're also going to help create content. They're going to help organize events. A great thing that any business can I guess use its community for, or one of the benefits that it can get from the community is just having community members show up at various events that the company is doing with its customers. Kind of the same way you have customers in the room when you want people to be sharing their case studies or their experiences with the tools. Well, having a community is like just a way to amplify that even more. You can get amazing case studies out of the community. You can get amazing community people in the room. And they might not be your biggest accounts. They might not be the highest paying customers, but they might be very influential in the space. So if you have the creator of the open source project or the maintainer or someone with a lot of clout, they can come in and be a great reference for prospects and customers. So really just having people to bring into the room, it's not just you, but it's the community around, that can be a really powerful signal for.
Yeah. And what should a company give to the community? Because you mentioned that the benefits should flow both ways. So what is it that you give to a community? Is it new features, free plan? What can you provide? How do you build value with the community?
Yeah, it can be specific to the community, but there's a lot of things that tend to be pretty common. A lot of times a company can help its community members get a reach inside of their own ecosystem. And that can be as simple as publishing content on that the community members are writing. Not every developer has a blog that's super highly trafficked. Many of them don't, but they might write an article about your service that you can then publish on the company blog, which probably has a lot of visibility, and actually give that developer more visibility. You can, the other options range from very simple things like swag and t-shirts and rewards, recognition, product credits. Communities are usually very happy to receive product credits where it makes sense. And that's a really win-win situation if it means that developers can build more with the credits that they have, because then it gives you more cool stuff to talk about and together with them. And I also love to give the community beta access, new features, information that might not be shared publicly, like the roadmap. At Orbit, we're very, very open to sharing our roadmap. I mean, pretty much with anyone who's interested in it, but in particular, we try to get our community involved in a lot of those conversations too. And they love to see it. They're really happy to get the transparency, and so they feel like they know where it's headed, and they have the opportunity to give input and drive that.
This reminds me of a conversation I had with Gaëtan Gachet, the Chief Strategy Officer at Algolia, and he was explaining that Algolia decided to have a super low price point for and a big free plan for their community, for developers to be able to try out Algolia, build side project with Algolia, and then become advocates and become part of the community. So it really aligns with the value of the company as well. And actually, that's a great segue, because not every company is ready to build a community. And part of this is because the CEO or the executives do not believe in communities, just like they won't invest in partnerships. And something that I've learned with partnerships is that the number one thing is to be aligned on the expectations. What do you expect from the community? What do you expect from partnerships? Sales team will want more leads. Customer success will want their onboarding to go faster. Marketing will want reach. So every team expects different things, but you can get everything from your community. So if you should convince a CEO of a company to invest in communities, what should they expect, and what has to be true to make that a success?
I think you kind of hinted at it, that the community can help in a lot of different ways, and it takes some time for that to happen. So looking at the CEO's current top priorities and the company's top priorities, and figuring out immediately where community can become relevant first, I think that that's a really good strategy, because the CEO has a ton of priorities. A lot of them are very competing. There's urgency. There is a quarterly mindset. We want to see at least something if we're going to start to invest in that. So I don't think the argument that the long term everything is going to be better is a good upfront argument when making the business value of community with a CEO. I think the better thing to do is ask what two or three of the top priorities are. Maybe it's customer satisfaction. Maybe it's increasing the NPS. Maybe it's increasing leads from one part of the market, one part of where users are today. Maybe it's building connections between key customers, because that's driving partnerships or driving additional revenue. And so trying to figure out what one of those are, and then looking at how community can influence that. And then if that program gets greenlit, making sure that the community program is designed with those objectives in mind. Every community is designed a little bit differently, and depending on what you want to get out of it, you have to shape it differently. Building an ambassador, champions, MVP program looks different than a product-focused customer advocacy program. It looks different than a program you might do to just try to drive up the overall share of voice across social media and online platforms. That all of those look a little bit different.
How do you know if your community or DevRel team is big enough? Is it related to how big is your company? How do you know if, let's say you have 3 DevRels, how do you know if it's enough or not?
A great question. I would say, because I've definitely been there, in many DevRel teams that I've been on or been a leader on, and felt the squeeze. The squeeze with DevRel happens because every other department in the company, every piece of the organization is often has a reason to be talking to and working with DevRel, which is a blessing, because it means that in DevRel you build relationships with sales, with marketing, with solutions engineers, with success, with leadership, with engineering, with product, giving product feedback. You can really find yourself in DevRel at the center of a lot of the rest of the teams. I know when I was at Algolia, I knew people from all across the organization, and that was fantastic. What can happen though is the demands on the time for that team increase with the amount of people that know that it exists and know that there are some things that it can do. Facilitate an intro, reply to a thread, give a customer a question, help out on support. There was a lot of things that DevRel team can do. Attend an event, things like that. So I think that a DevRel a good way to size a DevRel team appropriately is just to look at the number of requests for the time, sit down with an executive or whoever's the sponsor of the team and figure out which one of those really need to be fulfilled, and then look at what the team size is according to that. Because you don't have to have a team size that can do everything that's being asked of it if some of that stuff doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. If it all matters, then it's very important. And because there's so much context switching, developer advocates are doing a lot of different things all day. If as soon as you try to put too much on it, you risk grinding the whole thing to a halt, the way you do with any kind of sophisticated system once the requests are. So it's important to size the teams correctly, and it's important to scope the work and the expectations that you're giving to the team.
Yeah, and also if they are to work with different teams, it's very hard to. DevRel, they need to work with sales team, with the marketing team, with events team. So that's also a lot of empathy that they need to have, because they need to understand what everyone's job is and what they care about. And that's my next question is going to be about the sales team and develop and communities or DevRel teams. Usually, there's a split, or it's between the sales team and the marketing team, the sales team and the community team. How do you build bridges between the sales team and DevRel teams or community teams?
I think communication is key, and both sides understanding the goals of the other side is very important, and that can be accomplished by bringing the teams together, depending on the size of the organization, once a month or once a quarter, to share like what are they working on, what are the goals, especially for the DevRel team to come into the sales team and do a presentation there, like what are we seeing? DevRels usually, because they're on the front lines, get a lot of intelligence around what's the competition doing, where are developers warming up or cooling down, what are the features we're hearing from the community that they like or do not like. There's a lot of that. So that's what I've done in the past, is try to give that kind of report to the sales team on a recurring basis, so that they know what the DevRel team is seeing out there in the field. And then, the priority, what the DevRel team is often asking of the sales team is to be cautious when it comes to outreach to the community, sales presence or marketing presence in community channels that can potentially turn developers away. So I think it's important for the developer relations team to share with the sales team, here's what working with the community looks like, a successful way of doing that in our lives. But here's the things that you might be doing that actually are making it harder to build the community. And is there a different way that we could be accomplishing those? Like maybe instead of having a drip campaign that would be aggressive for a community member on a free plan, maybe there's another way that we can get that person engaged and actually make both sides more successful in the future. So if each side understands the other one's goals, that's going to be the start to a good relationship.
Yeah, okay. And this is why the Orbit model is important, because you don't want the sales team to jump on community members like they will jump on a fresh new lead, so they need to understand that there are rules to engage with the different orbits.
Yeah, we think about like an ice cream cone. We've got the orbit on the top, and then the funnel, the cone part at the bottom, and you wait for the ice cream to drip down into the cone. You can't really force it sometimes. It's the job of the community team to make sure that the community itself is growing, the ice cream is growing, and that the drips aren't falling on the floor. But that doesn't mean you go up into the ice cream and start like throwing stuff around, because that doesn't work. You got to wait. But you can organize the effort such that all of that amazing stuff that happens in the community turns into the potential that it has on the commercial side.
Okay, so if you're negotiating a budget for a community team, you start ice cream you bring ice cream to the CEO and you start with this metaphor.
That's right. You're like, look at all this great stuff that's going to drip down into the funnel that's not there. And the funnel, people are going to move through the funnel faster. It's not just about awareness. It's always also about you're taking sand out of the funnel so less things get stuck in.
Yeah. I like the fact that it's not like the Orbit model is not replacing the funnel. it sits on top somehow.
Yeah,
Cool. I think we
complementary.
are running out of time. So thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. I think that every sales team should listen to this conversation. Let's finish with the famous five. Current or favorite book you are reading or have read? Business or
Right.
novel?
Okay, great. I'll choose business. That's an easy question to answer right now. I'm reading Ask Your Developer by Jeff Lawson, who is the co-founder and CEO of Twilio.
Okay.
Really, really good read. A lot of the same topics I'm talking about here.
So the previous interview was with Gaëtan, and he advised me to read the same book. So I think they're like, this is my
Wow.
fate, they're cool. I'm
I
ordering
will.
this book today.
I will also. I have one more to recommend. Building in Public by Nadia Egbal is
Okay.
another very, very, very good book about
All right.
the shape and structure of communities in open source.
Cool. Thank you. 2 books for the price of one.
Got two.
An executive you should follow or study.
One of my favorites is D Hawk, DEE. He's the co-founder and CEO emeritus of Visa, the Visa Corporation, and he's written books like One from Many and a variety of others that are around organizational design and leadership, and they're just fantastic. So I really enjoy reading what D Hawk is writing about, and then also I'd say Tim O'Reilly, who a lot of people will know, who's really famous for the create more value than you capture mindset. And we think a lot about that in the Orbit model. It's like how's the company creating value, not just capturing it too, but also creating it.
Favorite Twitter or Reddit account to relax?
I guess it's a little more of a blog, but I would say Wait But Why is one of my favorite places on the internet. XKCD also. Those are when I have an internet minute, I'll tend to check that out.
Cool. Favorite online tool?
One we've been using for team sessions since we're a remote team is called Scriblio, and it's an online Pictionary tool. Really, really simple, easy to get set up. We do community events with it, and it's just been really nice, really fun way to get people to interact together. And then more on the business side, I would say Miro is a tool that I've been using more and more in the last 4 or 6 months for whiteboarding, diagramming, and just use that for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, love this tool. Cool. And who should I interview next?
I think on the community side, we had a woman named Rosie Sherry on the podcast. We have a podcast ourselves, and she's she's I think the head of community at Indie Hackers, and has some amazing perspective on community. And I also really appreciate the work that David Spinks and John O'Bacon have both have amazing stuff when they're writing and speaking about community.
Yeah, I love also the website Indie Hackers. So many things to learn there. Cool.
Yeah, great community.
Yeah, awesome community. Cool. Yeah, that's maybe a last question, if I may. Examples of companies that you think are crushing it when it comes to community building and engaging with the community.
Yeah, one that comes to mind right away is Apollo. They're the Apollo GraphQL company. They're an Orbit user and one of our earliest users, and they just do such an amazing community presence across multiple different channels: Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, events, their blog. Just really they just launched a new education platform. So it's really, really amazing what the team at Apollo is doing, really teaching so many developers about GraphQL and the potential power, in addition to what Apollo does as a business. So they're very good at just evangelizing kind of the technology, and that's how so many developers have come to know about them and learn about them.
Cool, awesome. Josh, thank you so much. That was amazing, simply amazing. Thank you so much
for having me.
all the inside information. Cool. Well, I'll put all the links in the video for everyone. Go and check out Orbit.love. They're doing an amazing job. And Thank you, Josh.
All right. Thank you,
Cheers.
Johnny Darren. Thanks, everyone.
Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. We'd love to hear your feedback, so feel free to send us a message or ping us directly in the comments. And if you'd like to join our community, feel free to visit our website operations.family. Cheers!